Happy Thanksgiving! Yes, it is Thanksgiving. It's actually Thanksgiving. I am here. I am Brian Ward, and I am with Dr. Andrea Letamendi. As always, the psychologist we are here to really listen to talk about Batman. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. It is actually Thursday, Thanksgiving. We were going to record this episode earlier, but it turns out Thanksgiving week is kind of a busy week. It's hard to get ready for a show like this.
Well, we've got the turkey in the oven.
The turkey is, folks, there is actually a turkey in the oven right now.
We have watched several episodes of Twilight
Zone.
Magic. Friendship is magic.
Yeah, well, no. I'm glad that you didn't suggest that we were watching lots of episodes of Twilight.
No.
Because we are not. We are watching the Twilight Zone.
We've watched several episodes. I'm so happy. I'm very giddy. We've watched several episodes of the Twilight Zone, which is, of course, there's a huge marathon today. And probably other than Batman the Animated Series, the Twilight Zone series is one that I have watched so many times and is, beloved to me. So yeah. It's been a good day so far.
If there's another show that you and I should do a psychology of, it might even be the Twilight Zone. Because,
that would be awesome.
It's not just supernatural. It's actually full of psychology and lots of great themes there.
And the stories, just like BTAS, the stories still hold true today.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to kick off this Thanksgiving episode. By the way, if you are not in the United States, happy Thursday or Friday or Saturday, whatever day you're listening to this, we hope you're having a great day. This is, of course, the Arkham Sessions. This is the podcast that actually analyzes every episode of Batman the Animated Series. This is our 44th episode, which means, Drea, we're actually more than halfway through the complete series of Batman the Animated Series. There were 85 episodes of the series. We're on 44. So time is flying. But I'm having a really great time talking about these episodes with you.
I agree. I don't really want it to stop.
And it won't. I'm sure we'll continue in some way, shape, or form. But we want to talk about actually the show we did last week. We got a lot of responses to that show. That was Moon of the Wolf. Turns out that's one of the favorite episodes that people have had because it was such a fun episode to record. We were talking about a legendary writer, Len Wein, adapting his own comic into his first episode of Batman the Animated Series. We got to talk about lycanthropy. We got to talk about actual clinical lycanthropy. So if you've not heard that episode, I highly recommend you go back, listen to Moon of the Wolf, and you'll get to hear Drea talk about a thing called clinical lycanthropy, which is real werewolfism.
Well, it's real, but it's not necessarily werewolfism so much as it's this delusion, this belief that someone is a werewolf.
Delusions are always fun to hear you talk about. So I highly recommend you go back and listen to that episode. One of our good friends, Mac, actually responded on Facebook that she was disappointed that we didn't actually talk a little more about sort of what Anthony Romulus would have gone through becoming a werewolf and maybe recovering from being a werewolf, that sort of thing. I kind of feel like we certainly could have speculated a little bit, but you kind of did a little of that when we talked about Selina Kyle in the episode only a couple of, with Tigress,
right,
Tiger.
When Selina is transformed into a cat, like into this anthropomorphic cat.
Yeah, she becomes feline, and then I asked you toward the end of that episode to speculate as to what it is she might be going through once she recovers from having been this feline creature. And of course, you couldn't say exactly, and we didn't see Selina in the last episode, so we don't know where she is in her recovery. But,
Right, well, anytime anytime someone does anything to you that's outside of your control. Now, these are very supernatural things, being turned into a werewolf, being turned into a giant cat.
Yeah.
There's this sense of somebody violating your rights. There's a sense of this physical transformation and the transformation back to your previous state. So of course there's a lot there in terms of lack of control, in terms of adjustment, in terms of both a physical and psychological recovery. So I would say that they're very similar cases, and I'd say that there are absolutely issues that need to be resolved and need to be addressed for both of them. And, of course, a lot has to do. I have more experience with trauma and trauma recovery. So I would say a lot has to do with that element of, somebody did this to me. So it's somebody's fault that I was, violated, I was targeted, and I was transformed against my will.
Right.
And there can also be this sense of self-blame in terms of Romulus. I have some participation in this. I wanted that stimulant. I wanted that serum. I wanted to be better. And that got me into trouble. So there can be elements of self-blame and guilt and shame associated with that. And so I think both cases are really fascinating and lead to, some aspects of recovery from trauma.
Yeah, there was also a tweet that was sent to us after last week's episode from based on some conversation that you and I had, where you said that you could almost see Tigress, the sort of anti-hero, the villain turned anti-hero of Tiger. You would like to see an interaction between Tigress and the werewolf, from Moon of the Wolf, Romulus. You almost saw the two of them hanging out a little bit, and then you said,
right.
And then you mentioned that would kind of change your outlook of Tigress a little bit.
Well, I think it was this fantasy of mine that there's this island or this place where all of these transformed mutant beasts could hang out in.
Well, I will tell you that Q_M, otherwise known as @Q_Montague on Twitter, actually tweeted us a page from the Batman Animated Adventures comic book, where an issue in that comic actually has Romulus retreating to the island and finding Tigress.
What?
And not only that, but knowing who he is, knowing that Dorian was creating these creatures, and there is an exchange there. Romulus actually points out, that you're one of Dorian's creations, aren't you? Please take me to him. I have to see him. Presumably this is so that he can be transformed back into a human permanently.
I see.
And Tigress says that he's not here. He's in Gotham, and he sort of bemoans the fact that Selina is also in Gotham. Well, this strikes Romulus's, he immediately says, well, I can take you to her. Selina Kyle, I know who she is. Don't you want to see her again? And that particular page that he scanned basically ends with him saying, wouldn't you like to see her again? And Tigress is smiling. So you get the sense that in that particular issue of the comic, Tigress probably goes to Gotham, probably stalks Selina. This is the kind of the problem that I have with expanded universe stories, which is that at the end of Tiger, you and I left that episode thinking of Tigress as a very sad character, but a very moral character, a character who had found himself and had realized that he was alone in the world, was going to go off and maybe like Kane and Kung Fu, walk the earth and find himself and, whatever. Like he was a character that sort of knew that he was by himself, and a comic like this reintroduces him and almost, I'm guessing just based on this one page, because I've not read the issue, I'm guessing he kind of becomes one of the antagonists of this issue.
It could possibly vilify him. I agree. I think, the purpose of every BTAS episode for me is a lesson.
Yeah.
It's an important, meaningful story with an important, meaningful message. And for me, that story ended with, of course, this was a tragedy, and the unfortunate result of that was this character who was perhaps remoralized, if you will, but who we don't know the fate of. And I think the uncertainty of his fate, wondering about him, being concerned about him, and learning his lesson is important for us. I do want to just say it's very cool to see that he continues on in another story, and he has this interesting relationship with this werewolf, aka Romulus. I see that Romulus is in his human form, which is weird. I kind of pictured they'd both be these beasts kind of hanging out together.
Well, presumably somewhere over the course of the month, when the moon becomes full, Romulus would then become a werewolf. But, for only a day of the month or a couple of days of the month, depending on, the waxing, waning of the full moon, blah, blah, blah. You would...
True. I mean, I don't dislike that it happened in a comic, but I would not have wanted that in the animated series.
Yeah. I'm glad that the story exists, but like you, I'm kind of glad it's not an episode. We also had a couple of great tweets. Sark, who is at Pastor of Batman. That's a religion I would follow without,
I'm a member.
Without a second of hesitation. Actually tweeted that he wasn't expecting that to become one of his favorite episodes, but it was, which was a nice surprise. Thank you very much, Sark. We appreciate that. And then we have a new listener, Michael Bailey, from at Bailey's Podcasts. He says, today, being Thanksgiving, he is thankful for the Arkham Sessions for entertaining him as he cleans up for Thanksgiving dinner. So if you wanted proof that this was in fact Thanksgiving Day, we have a tweet from Thanksgiving Day. People are preparing Thanksgiving listening to the show, and we appreciate that.
Wow, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I couldn't be more thankful for this opportunity to be talking about one of my all-time favorite shows with someone else who feels the same way and can look at it even deeper than I ever imagined. So thank you, Drea.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for giving me this interesting, platform to talk about my passions.
Love it. So we also got an email from Serena, and this probably is one of my favorite emails in the history of emails, because last week we talked about throwing shade. You mentioned, or I mentioned throwing shade, it was one of those newfangled terms the kiddies were talking about these days, but I didn't quite understand what it meant. You corrected me and said that, throwing shade was something else. I don't even entirely remember. That's how old I am. I can't even retain the knowledge of what throwing shade and the new lingo actually...
You said something along the lines of, it's insulting somebody.
I think it was like, they're staring them down or something, like giving them the evil eyes.
And then I corrected you and I said, no, it's when you do it, but you're so above them. Like you're superior to them, so you wouldn't bother to insult them directly.
Yeah.
Turns out we were a little bit off.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay. Serena says that she's been a listener for a while, but couldn't help but to laugh when we were talking about finding the meaning of throwing shade as one of those kids today, according to me. She would be happy to explain it to us. It's essentially when you insult someone, but doing so goes over their head. The person you mean to insult won't understand you in you talking about them, but onlookers or anyone else who knows what's up probably will. It's got to be done in an indirect way. An example she is happy to give us, and I'm happy about this. An example would be like when Nicki Minaj won at the BET Awards and said something along the lines of, I want you to know that when you hear Nicki rap, Nicki wrote it. Even though she already said no shade, she was 100% throwing shade at Iggy Azalea, who we're all pretty sure has ghostwriters. I don't know who any of these people are, but I'm happy to know what throwing shade now means.
I feel enlightened. I feel a little bit more insightful about it.
So those are the emails and tweets of the past week. Thank you all very much for getting in touch with us. As always, you can email us arkhamsessions@gmail.com, or you can go over to underthemaskonline.com and email Drea directly there. You can also find us. We are Arkham Sessions at Arkham Sessions on Twitter, and you can also send us all of your questions or your comments. You can watch episodes ahead and you can send us questions. We like to address them. But until then, we're going to discuss this week's episode. It's the 44th episode, and it is Day of the Samurai, which is the great follow-up to the previous episode with our villain Kyodai Ken, which was Night of the Ninja. So this one, and if you remember in that particular episode, Bruce Wayne, as Batman, tells Robin that there's a distinct difference between ninjas and samurai, which is that samurai have honor and ninjas do not. They will win by any means necessary. And that plays out pretty heavily in this episode. There is a great resolution to that. So the first thing I want to talk about in this particular episode is this.
誰なの?何の用なの?
お相手をしていただきたくてね。さあ、踊りましょう。
I don't know that I can help you much with this one.
I was really kind of relying on you to do so. But if you need help, I understand. The thing that I love about this episode, and this sort of goes to what you and I have said about Batman the Animated Series all along, which is that it's much deeper than a traditional children's cartoon. This was ostensibly done for kids, and yet a lot of this episode is performed in Japanese.
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic. It's the kind of thing we have grown to expect from Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and company. This episode is written by Steve Perry, but it was directed by Bruce Timm. And this is the kind of thing we've come to expect from them, a much deeper look. Kids totally could have gotten this because not only were there subtitles, but they are in Japan.
Right.
So they are speaking Japanese. It's not just people doing bad Japanese accents.
Right. And those cultural aspects are not thrown into your face, in a forced way. It's sort of, it just happens to be the setting, the environment, the city. Mm-hmm. You're seeing as Bruce Wayne arrives in Nippon that he's in a robe, he's drinking tea, he's not wearing shoes indoors. These things that are really integral parts of this culture. Mm-hmm. But again, we don't get this lesson in it. Like sometimes you see this in current TV shows for kids that it's kind of they make a big point about it. And here it's the idea that you are immersed in this lifestyle.
Yeah. And
the idea is that you're it is just like they wouldn't force it when they're in Gotham. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't force those cultural aspects and values on you. They're doing it in a way that I think is culturally, just really appropriate. And they do it in a great way. So I appreciated that about the show.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And I enjoyed every episode or every scene that was done in Japanese because it just made the entire thing feel that much more genuine and sort of gave it this authenticity that we don't often get from cartoons. And I say bravo to Bruce Timm and the folks behind Batman the Animated Series. So we start out with this particular episode. Our old friend Kyodai Ken, dressed in his traditional ninja garb, actually attacks a young star pupil by the name of I'm going to mispronounce it, I'm sure, but Kairi, and she is the star pupil of their old sensei, Yoro Sensei, and this is the sensei that brought up Bruce Wayne, brought up Kyodai Ken, and we saw before there was the attempt to capture a sword. Bruce Wayne defended him. Right. Kyodai Ken was sent away with no honor, became a ninja, always sought his revenge. So now he is kidnapping this star pupil of Yoro Sensei. The old sensei finds this message, looks at it, and is very grim about it. Now, we don't know what's on the paper, but we then cut to the Batcave where Batman is doing his Batman things, and Alfred brings down a phone, and I kind of enjoyed this particular exchange.
What is it, Alfred?
Yoru Sensei, line 3.
Konnichiwa, Sensei.
Once again...
Seamless.
Yeah, once again, he seamlessly goes from, what is it, Alfred? Konnichiwa, Sensei. It's always funny to hear the Bruce Wayne voice when he's in full costume.
Right.
I always appreciate those scenes. But he finds out that something has happened. The young girl is missing, and it's time for him to go back to Japan in order to fulfill his duty, his honor to his sensei. And when he gets there, he sees, while he's on the plane to Japan, to Nippon, he actually looks at the letter, and it is the drawing of Kyodai Ken's dragon-like, dragon-like symbol, the thing he's got tattooed to his back. And so he knows who it is. He knows who took him, or who took the girl. And he goes and actually has what is kind of a great exchange with his old sensei. He asks, you know that I'm willing to do anything for you. And I'm certainly willing to look for Kyodai Ken, but why choose me? And he says, the sensei responds.
Of course I will help in any way I can, Sensei. But what made you think of calling me?
You cannot hide the warrior spirit behind your playboy image, Wayne-san. Kyodai Ken returned from America in defeat.
He was beaten by Batman.
So it is said.
So you get the sense that Yoro Sensei knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And he says that he would like Bruce, who must know Batman, to recruit his help in finding the girl. And I love this because the sensei wasn't there. He didn't see the two of them fight. He didn't see Batman. But somehow knowing that Kyodai Ken was embarrassed, was sent back to Japan in defeat, he knows that Bruce must be Batman. But he's not willing to come right out and say it.
I don't know that he has to. I think it's an unspoken understanding that he brings Bruce Wayne there knowing that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And I think Bruce Wayne doesn't feel compelled to explain or to defend or to, either way. I think there's an agreement there. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because there's clearly, we have talked before about Bruce Wayne not trusting others, not getting close to others, being very withholding with his emotions. And I think this is an example where there is a lot of trust between him and someone else. So much so that there's no, as I said, no defensive response. There's no need to cover it up. And there's even no need to, to try to explain why he's Batman to him, right?
Except that he actually does play it off. He's sort of like, the Yoro Sensei says, you know him, right? You know this Batman. And Bruce simply says, we've met. No, what I mean is that he doesn't, that's not him trying, that's him almost agreeing with him and letting him know, yes, you're right, I understand. Yeah.
And again, it's this sense of trust between them. Mm-hmm. It's clearly there's loyalty. Clearly there's this sense of closeness. And I think, going back to the last episode, Night of the Ninja, we know that the sensei is like almost a father figure to him.
Sure.
Had mentored him, trained him, guided him. And other than Alfred, it's somebody who he does see as this older parental figure. Mm-hmm. So I'm appreciative that, here we have this example of someone who he can trust with his secrets.
Yeah. Loved it.
And now here's a chance for him to show his appreciation for this person and to prove himself to this parental figure.
Yeah, and what does he have to prove exactly? He has to sort of beat Kyodai Ken to this scroll that is this ancient scroll that describes this fighting technique that is a super dangerous fighting technique. In fact,
it was such an efficient and terrible fighting art that the master decided it was too dangerous to teach.
So this guy, years and hundreds of years ago, 500 years ago, if I remember correctly, the story begins 500 years ago when this sensei actually develops this fighting style that is so deadly that he could, with one touch, hinder someone incapacitated, unconscious, and in some cases, even he can kill them. And this is so dangerous that he takes the scroll and he takes it to an undisclosed mountainous area and hides it. The only person that knows where this scroll is his son. And that has become a family secret through the last several hundred years. And Yoro Sensei has no son, so it will die with him, this secret.
The secret, right.
And the whole thing is essentially Kyodai Ken knows this. He wants the scroll because with the scroll, he can then defeat Batman. He can then defeat and essentially defeat Bruce Wayne. Well, Alfred and those around Bruce don't necessarily see the connection there, but Bruce explains it pretty well, actually.
He fought Bruce Wayne and Batman. Fighting styles are like fingerprints. Kyodai knows that we're the same man.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's pretty scary. Kyodai, excuse me, Kyodai wants to kill Batman. He wants to kill Bruce Wayne. He wants to learn this deadly touch, which can give you the big sleep or the eternal sleep. And he needs the scroll in order to do that. So that's why he has kidnapped this girl. He plans on ransoming her off. He is going to deliver her when he gets the map that sends him to the location where the scroll can be found. Well, Bruce actually says, look, I will take him the scroll, but Sensei, you realize you could just give him a fake map and everything would be cool. This is what's great about the Sensei, is he basically says, you know the code of Bushido. You know that I, as a samurai spirit, can't lie. I cannot be dishonorable. I have to give him the actual location of the scroll because that is what I would do. Being myself and being this good soul, this good spirit. I am not ninja. I will not deceive him. Mm-hmm. I am samurai. I have honor. Which could actually, I guess it's a bit of a hindrance. You can be honorable to a fault.
Well, because that could lead to a series of events where someone could be fatally, injured. Essentially, if the real map gets to Kyodai Ken and he learns this one-handed killer move and ends up killing Batman and Bruce Wayne, of course, it's almost one of those situations where, the ends justify the means. Mm-hmm. So I get that he can't. I get that the Sensei can't necessarily deceive or lie, mm-hmm. but you'd think there'd be other ways to circumvent this end result.
Yeah.
I think the Batman is in grave danger.
No. Yeah, because he's going to give him the map.
Well, because of you, fool.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, your honor is going to kill the Batman. So he gives Bruce Wayne the actual map. Bruce, dressed as Batman, of course, visits him on a rooftop in order to make the exchange. It doesn't go quite as well as planned. The girl fights back, which is fantastic. She is a very strong character in this particular episode. She fights back, and Kyodai Ken ends up kicking her off the roof. Batman, of course, goes after her and loses the scroll in the process. Kyodai Ken now has it, goes and finds the map and goes and finds the actual scroll, which is basically over the turn of 500 years buried in a cave, turned to dust, with the exception of one very key corner of the scroll, which is very convenient because when you look at the rest of the scroll, like there's very little legible, wording on that scroll. But Kyodai Ken has like the entire thing. Like anything you need to know is on this corner. And that is, it's trouble for Batman.
Well, yes.
So Kyodai Ken now knows the secrets, or at least all the secrets that he needs in order to finally defeat his arch nemesis.
And I blame one person. And that is Sensei.
Yoro Sensei?
Yeah.
They end up, he gets the scroll. He does his training. He learns where all of the pressure points are that will kill a man and with one touch. And he sets up this fight with Batman, gives him a location, and the location turns out to be right there, basically on top of a volcano. I mean, it's not even at the base of the volcano. It's like right up on the volcano.
And the volcano is active.
Yeah, the volcano is very active. In fact, the volcano seems to be angry that Kyodai Ken took the scroll out of its caves.
Look, if you're going to kill Batman with one finger, you're going to do it at a volcano.
Well, and I love this scene, although, we can really dive into the psychology here because Kyodai Ken actually says something that's kind of fascinating here.
Let us face each other in the open, man to man. Samurai do not hide behind masks.
So Batman says that he would prefer to think of himself as a samurai. Kyodai Ken says, yeah, but you're just as much a ninja as I am. Like, you're no samurai. You fight with masks. You fight in the darkness. You'll do anything to win. You have no real honor. You are a ninja.
Right.
And is willing to give him credit for that, actually says that he is a good ninja, and they're going to fight. They're basically going to fight to the death. Batman is given the opportunity to take off the cape and cowl. What would you think that Batman that we've seen for 43 previous episodes would do?
Well, we know that he has an extra set somewhere.
He does have it, unless he's given them all out to those villains that need them in Arkham Asylum.
He typically gets around it. He typically does not take off his mask. But I know that he's aware that Kyodai Ken knows his identity. Mm-hmm. So he may, we know, we've seen it. So.
And at this point, Kyodai Ken has actually kidnapped Alfred. That's actually how he lures Batman there to fight, is he says, that you can come get him if you're willing to fight me. And Batman shows up, of course. Now, Batman removes his cape and cowl. And I find that to be a little shocking, maybe. I mean, Kyodai Ken knows that he is Batman, but that's never necessarily, I can't say it's stopped Bruce in the past because he's not come across this situation before. But at the same time, because Bruce is almost a different character from Bruce Wayne and from Batman, and there is this smooth transition between characters. Do you get where I'm going? Like, it's kind of weird.
But you clearly have a problem with Bruce Wayne's face being in, the suit.
A little bit.
Fighting in the suit, but as Batman.
A little bit. Well, it's more that Bruce sort of relates to Batman, and you and I have said for the last 43 episodes that Batman is a character to himself. He is the cape, the cowl, the sensibility, he is everything about that. So the moment that he removes the cape and cowl and doesn't necessarily have the additional mask to hide his face, he's now Bruce in a suit. Like, he's now to me, he's not necessarily Batman anymore.
So is he going to be less effective? Is he going to be somehow not as successful in this fight? Is he going to second guess himself or question himself?
I think his superpowers come with the cowl and the cape. That's all I'm saying. No, not really. I don't know.
There's something going on here with your beliefs. It's almost similar to Dumbo and his magic feather. That there's this effect that this mask has.
It's not the effect.
Him.
It's not the effect that the mask has. Although I would say that it's a pretty good analogy. I would say that Bruce, as Batman, has usually felt the need to become Batman. Any other time that Bruce could have ended something bad happening or could have kept something from going wrong in a situation, Bruce always ducks away and becomes Batman first.
Sure.
It's this almost inherent need to be this other persona. Otherwise, I can't make this work.
Sure.
And one could say that that's a confidence thing. One could be like, well, I need the suit in order to be Batman. But someone else could say, well, no, he's just hiding his identity. And the identity isn't
I think it's
hidden.
more than that. I mean, the truth of the matter is that, yes, there are studies that show that wearing masks and helmets, anything that covers your face, can impact and influence your behavior. And there are studies that show that wearing such things could increase aggressiveness, could increase violence, could make people more confident. And it's not so much what the mask itself does as it is the effect on anonymity.
Yeah.
Now, in this case, it's not about anonymity.
Sure.
It's about, we discussed that Kyodai Ken knows his true identity, and they're on top of a volcano, so no one's going to see them.
Right. And if you're going to remove your cape and cowl in front of anyone, Alfred is a safe person to do it in front of. But as we've noted, Batman can't even talk to Alfred without using the Batman voice.
Right. So I would argue that, in agreement with you, there is something going on with the identity that has to do with the suit, with the uniform, with the mask and the cape. And I think it's above and beyond anonymity.
Yeah.
It has to do with his need, perhaps, to assume the identity of Batman in order to do the things he's about to do. Because as you mentioned, this could be a fight to the death.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I wanted to point out here as well, is Batman has this code of honor. He will not kill anyone. You and I I speculated that maybe that came from a former occasion where he may have come very close to it and then made the conscious decision not to again. And in this particular case, it's weird because you almost get the sense as he removes the cape and the cowl that he knows that this can only end one way, and that is with one of them dead. Like, where are you going to take Kyodai Ken? You're not going to take him to Gotham. You're not going. Commissioner Gordon isn't going to show up with a police wagon.
No, it's outside his jurisdiction.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And no one else really knows that Kyodai Ken, it's not like Batman is there on an international exchange program and that they're, he's working with them. No one is after Kyodai Ken. This is a personal vendetta, and this is a mission that can really end only one way, and that is with one of them dead. And when he removes the cape and the cowl, you almost get the sense, even for a second, Batman's willing to kill Kyodai Ken. Did you get that sense? Like the moment that he took that cape and cowl off and he's like, okay, let's do this. Did you get the sense that he could have ended it that way? I'm not saying that's how it ends. And I'm not saying that, that Batman doesn't then come out of that, but for a moment I got that sense.
I honestly never got that sense, but I did get the sense that that Batman is willing to do anything he can to defend himself. And in defense, he may have to seriously injure and maybe kill Kyodai Ken. But I seriously doubt that his intent was one of us has to die and it's going to be you.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's his intent. I think it's almost his acknowledgement.
Yeah, I would say he will. I would say at that point he willingly goes into it knowing this could end in one of us dead.
We're gonna get a lot of emails from this. I just want you to know this. I am going to be lambasted. Yeah, people are going to hate me for my acknowledgement that Batman might know that one of them has to die. Well, it turns out that it could very well be Batman, because Kyodai Ken has the scroll. He knows how to do things like the death touch. He knows how to end this fight, and Batman basically has to do the fight kind of without touching him, because, they've established that any touch could kill him at this point. He doesn't know where the location is that he needs to be touched. It could be anywhere. And so he basically has to have this fight just letting Kyodai Ken miss him the entire time, which is kind of cool. So it ends with Batman not necessarily being able to stop Kyodai Ken, and the fingers go right into Batman's chest.
Oh, okay.
Sayonara, Batman.
Batman dies, and roll credits. That's the end of the series. I'm really happy to have done this with you, Drea. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, this was. Oh. No, it turns out that's not the end, because Batman actually went back to Kyodai Ken's dojo, found a dummy, figured out where the points were based on the wear and tear of the dummy, and protected himself. And he says that the death touch isn't going to work on him. Now, he actually tells Kyodai Ken that the ancient art doesn't even work. The technique doesn't work, which I think is kind of cool, because Kyodai Ken ends this episode basically having believed he failed.
Yeah.
Not that Batman defeated him with protection, but actually this art that I just mastered doesn't actually work. I probably shouldn't use it again, thinking that it would. You've got a guy who could be lethal now believing that he has no power whatsoever, which I thought was really cool. But Batman ends up taking him down. The two of them fight, and Batman gets a little slappy at Batman becomes really cocky at this point.
He's basically slapping his face. It's interesting. It no longer looks like martial arts to me.
Right. He's doing the blocks, and then he just starts slapping him around, and it becomes a little embarrassing. It becomes even more hurtful to Kyodai Ken's pride than maybe the first episode. With Kyodai Ken. It's an amusing moment. And the two of them are separated by this volcano that is erupting, and Batman tries to save him, sends out his Batarang, tells him to grab it, he'll pull him in, and Kyodai Ken kicks it away, bows to his arch nemesis, and suddenly there's an explosion, and Kyodai Ken is gone. Maybe he's dead.
But is he?
We don't know. Batman takes Alfred down off the volcano and speaks to his old sensei. Now, this is a very important moment for the psychology of this episode, because Bruce says, well, I don't know why you want me to thank Batman for you. Batman's really no better than Kyodai Ken. He's not really a samurai. He is a ninja. And the wise sensei ends up saying,
Batman is the essence of samurai, Wayne-san. You would do well to remember that.
So Yoro Sensei is telling him, A, I know you're Batman. B, you are a samurai, because you knew the location of the death touch, and you didn't use it against your enemy. You knew how to defeat Kyodai Ken. You could have let him die there before the explosion, but you tried to save him. That makes you different than a ninja. That makes you honorable. That makes you the essence of samurai. Drea, talk a little bit about Bruce and his own interpretation of himself, his own self-image, because clearly he was resigned to the idea that he was no better than Kyodai Ken.
I think that he has been given these messages by his opponents frequently. The Joker telling him, you're just as crazy as I am. Kyodai Ken saying, you don't have grace, you don't have honor. You're like me, you're a ninja. You cheat, you lie, you're a warrior of the night, just like me. And those messages impact Batman's self-esteem. Like, those are important to him. These are meaningful comments that do challenge his sense of self.
Sure.
And his self-concept. And that's very true to how we get our self-esteem and our beliefs in our achievements and our abilities and our beliefs in our failures and our lack of success. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great message at the end of this episode, where we realize even Batman has self-doubts and has sometimes low self-esteem, and could believe someone when they say, you don't have honor, you don't have ethics, you take shortcuts, you cheat, you lie, you're not as good. And I think that, we've talked about Bruce Wayne's or Batman's self-talk or his cognitive schema is what I've called it before. And those are the kind of like what you tell yourself to the core, what very core, deep down beliefs that you might have about yourself. And with him, he struggles with his own beliefs in his achievements, his own beliefs in whether he's avenged the death of his parents, his beliefs in whether he's actually doing a good thing. So he's constantly wrestling with the idea that he may be just as bad as these villains that he's going after and capturing and putting away. So for someone like, again, his mentor, this sensei, to tell him, you're not like a ninja, you're a samurai, you have grace and honor, you would save your opponent if their life was in danger. And that's, validating to hear.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Kyodai Ken a little bit. In the this entire episode is basically born out of pride, and the fact that he was embarrassed, the fact that he was hurt when he went to Gotham City and was put down by Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Talk about, I know we've spoken about revenge a little bit here, but where's Kyodai Ken in the beginning of this episode, at the end of this episode? Because in the beginning, he is determined to defeat Batman. In the end, he bows to him as if to say, you have won. And then there's an explosion and Kyodai Ken is gone.
Or is he?
Well, I will say this. Now, some listener may send us a page from the Batman Adventures comic book, but I will say that this is the last appearance of Kyodai Ken in the animated series. I would say that it's likely, given that knowledge, that Kyodai Ken died, and I would be okay with that because it is a very honorable death at this point. Like he realized he's been beaten. He realizes that he may never win, and he bows to Batman just before he knows he's going to die, which to me is a very meaningful moment, similar to Tigress saying that there's nowhere for him and walking away after having given Selina Kyle the antidote.
Right.
This is a moment where this character literally bows out. I'm done.
And unlike previous episodes, where we may see an ambiguous ending to somebody, here you really see him. He's standing on a rock and the lava is surrounding him, and then it just explodes. So there is little ambiguity here. It really does appear that he was destroyed by this volcano, and in fact we see, after the explosion, we just see the rock is missing and there's nothing but lava. So, I would agree. I think we're supposed to walk away from that believing that he had this tragic death. But to him, it may have been an honorable one. And, going back to self-esteem, when you're asking about Kyodai Ken and where he's at, I think this whole episode has to do with self-esteem and self-concept. Because what we know about self-esteem is actually really interesting. One would assume, and we're probably all in agreement, that poor self-esteem or low self-esteem is not good for us. And research shows that low self-esteem leads to higher rates of loneliness, depression, anxiety, physical health problems. So low self-esteem is, in fact, considered a poor outcome. It's considered something that could be bad for you, let's say. Now, high self-esteem, being very prideful, being having an inflated sense of self, that surprisingly is not good for us either. Studies show that high self-esteem can lead to aggression, can lead to violence, and it's the concept here, or the theory here, is that because people perceive or interpret neutral situations in their social environments as threatening, think about it this way. You think very highly of yourself, so you may encounter evidence that opposes that, or that shows that you may not be as good as you think.
So when Kyodai Ken fights Batman in Night of the Ninja and is defeated, he walks away with low self-esteem, comes back to Japan, uses that low self-esteem to fuel this vengeful rage and kidnap this girl, which then leads to him getting the scroll, which then leads to an overwhelming amount of self-confidence because he now believes that he has the secret and has mastered this 500-year-old technique that could kill his enemy with a single touch. But that actually gives him a little too much confidence.
I could see that working that way, yes. But the idea with having too much self-esteem is that you're sort of waiting. You're in a vulnerable state because at some point you will get evidence that you're not as smart, you're not as attractive, you're not as as effective, you're not as good as your job. Talking about us now, in the real world, that we are prone to experiencing negative feedback. But for people with very, very high inflated self-esteem, that could be too threatening and too damaging. So the effect is this defensive, and it's actually called defensive self-esteem. There's this defensive reaction, and some people resort to aggression and violence and some antisocial behaviors because of that. And we've talked about antisocial personality disorder. Now this is a rarer thing, but when people are so against the rules that they violate them and they violate the rights of other people and will actually engage in murder. Now, for those people, they tend to have what?
Problems.
Well, yes, but they tend to have this grandiose sense of self. Remember,
yes.
like the Joker,
Yes.
they think very highly of themselves. And so there seems to be this relationship there between inflated self-esteem and hostility and aggression.
Okay.
So the lesson here is that both ends of the spectrum could be damaging to us. Having low self-esteem or having high self-esteem could not be as adaptive as being somewhere in the middle, being balanced and being more realistic.
Okay.
And one could even argue that Batman here is sort of tempering that. He's finding his balance of self-esteem. That, many people are telling him he's not valuable, he's inefficient, he's a failure. And then even sometimes Commissioner Gordon will pick at him that way and question his loyalties and question his methods. And
Well, certainly Bullock.
right. And so here we have, an opportunity to look at how he's questioning his own sense of self, his self-concept, and how it's important for him to hear validating feedback that he is effective, that he is doing what's right, and he's distinct. He's different than the villains that he's going after. And that does impact his self-esteem. So he's trying to find this balance, and it's important for him to be able to recognize where he's at. It's important for us to have a good sense of self, to understand where we're at with that.
So let's talk about this death touch a little bit. So I've never heard of a Japanese equivalent, but there is actually a Chinese equivalent to this death touch, and it is the Demnak. Now, this is something, it's been used a lot in martial arts films and television shows. It's all over pop culture, and probably for a pretty good reason. It's basically considered fantasy at this point. The idea of the Demnak was that you would have a sort of a vibrating touch, and that with this vibrating hand or vibrating touch, you would hit certain pressure points and meridians. In a meridian in Chinese culture, it's basically where your life force, where your energy, it's the channels in which your energy flows. So your ki. So you are attacking these crucial pressure points and meridians, and with this, you can actually inflict death, and sometimes a delayed death. So there have actually been conspiracy theories that Bruce Lee's aneurysm was actually caused by maybe a couple of weeks earlier prior to him collapsing.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And, there's very little scientific evidence that supports that this particular move works. Anyone who's ever tried to demonstrate it will demonstrate it in such a way that it's certainly not fatal. And you know, you've not been able to, and in fact, third-party investigators have already disproven certain people who say that they have mastered the technique. So it is certainly something that fits very well with Batman and very well with the concept of a 500-year-old scroll that no one seems to know the answers for, because it's a technique that sort of doesn't exist, though it does. So there are people who actually teach it. There are people who will teach it knowing that...
I'm not willing to take a risk, so keep your vibrating fingers far away from me.
Well, that's unfortunate, but okay. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be discussing next week, and that is going back to those monsters that you love so much. I'm not going to tell you which one, but I will say that the episode is called Terror in the Sky. So you can almost guess that it has something to do
with Killer Croc.
with something. Yeah, exactly. Yes. The subterranean Killer Croc, totally in the sky.
So which Batman villain would be found in his natural environment in the sky?
His or her?
Oh.
We don't know. But that's coming up next week. Until then, Drea, let us know where people can find you online.
They can find me on Twitter. My handle is @ArkhamAsylumDoc. I also have a website, underthemaskonline.com. If you click on Contact Me, you can send me an email directly. And where can people find you, Brian?
I am on Twitter @bward028. You can find us both. We are at Arkham Sessions on Twitter. You can also email us arkhamsessions@gmail.com. By the way, a little bit of trivia for you. I don't know if you're a big anime fan, but in the moment that that Bruce Wayne receives his phone call allowing him to know that Alfred has been captured in this particular episode, you see a bunch of little numbers and letters go across as he's trying to decipher his location. He's trying to
Trace the call,
and a series of letters come up that actually read 563 Tezuka. Now, I don't know if you're an anime fan, but Osamu Tezuka is a very influential character in anime. He is considered by many to be the godfather of anime, and that was their little tribute to him in this Japanese-themed episode of this animated series.
Very cool.
And I thought it was really cool. I liked it. Little piece of trivia for you guys. I don't know. You can contact us. You absolutely should contact us. Let us know what you think about next week's episode, Terror in the Sky. We will answer those questions next week. Until then, my name is Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
The Arkham Sessions.